Welcome again to Crosshairs, the print weekly program where we discuss the important national security or regional security issue of the week. It's been a busy week with Rishi Sunak's election in the United Kingdom, war raging in Ukraine, but the extraordinary developments out of Pakistan on Thursday, probably the most important issue confronting our region right now. As all of you will have read, Imran, the Director General of the ISI, has held an unprecedented press conference in which he's been extremely critical of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Gul Bukhari joining us. And my first question to you, Gul, is this a sign that the much wanted unity of the Pakistan army is falling apart?
I think to the contrary, we saw it falling apart last year and beginning of this year. But what I see now is the army coalescing and moving more in lockstep than I have seen it move before. As you know, in April, when Imran Khan was removed from office through the no confidence vote, there was an unprecedented attack by the PTI supporters and PTI itself, its leaders, on the army. And the army was not able to react really. And that was when the split appeared to be at its peak to me, because he was very, very popular inside the army, in the rank and file, with the retired people, with their families, with serving people's families. And that's when we saw paralysis. They really could not act. And as you know, he went to formation commanders. He went to the core, not the core commanders, but all the formation commanders. That's really big. And then he held in Lahore a meeting of the retired officers where he was questioned brutally about regime change, about bringing in, as they call in Urdu, chores and dakus, that is thieves and dacoits, right? And he had to defend himself, really. And you could see that the divisions at that time did not allow the army to act either against the PTI, which was attacking it, and the attacks were also unprecedented. I mean, you know that Pakistan is a country where the public is always criticizing the army for its interventions, its interference, its political engineering, etc. But the kind of attacks that the PTI and Imran Khan led were unprecedented. And the silence at that time, the non-response that time was also unprecedented. They're known to be brutal. They are known to be brutally shut people up for saying far, far less. But what we see now is that they have overcome, Praveen, much of that dissent, because a lot of water has gone under the bridge. Imran Khan has said so many different things. He's called them Ghadar, he's called them Janwar, which is animal. He's called them jackals, he's called them Mir Jafar, Mir Sadiq, and now Dirty Harry, right? And his party maligned a helicopter accident or sabotage or whatever it was, in which the Lieutenant General and the Corps Commander of Balochistan died. So he has not been doing himself any favors, and the army has been working on this project. It has been changing opinion within its ranks, and those who were naysayers are being made irrelevant and being passed over and being retired.
I'll come back to that passing over question in a second. We're also joined by Myra McDonald, who, in addition to having served in India and written on all things India-Pakistan for many years, is the author of a fabulous book on the Siachen conflict and the India-Pakistan crisis of 2001-2002. Myra, over the years, the coup has been the Pakistan Army's final instrument of control. And we today had the ISI chief saying that the Pakistan Army discussed internally its political role a year ago and said that it's not going to engage in these kinds of machinations again. What options does that leave the Pakistan Army with? Does it still have any levers it can meaningfully pull to control politics? And will it prove enough to push back the Imran Khan tide, if you like?
Well, I mean, Gul has obviously much more qualified to discuss the internal domestic situation in Pakistan than me, but I mean, I'm just looking at it over the long perspective. I mean, we haven't had a coup since 1998 with Musharraf, but we have seen shifts over the years. I mean, the most obvious one was the 2007 lawyers' movement that eventually drove Musharraf out of office. I think, again, if I'm putting it in a long-term perspective, you heard a little bit of grumbling around the time of the American raid that captured and killed bin Laden. So I'm not entirely sure that what we're seeing is any different now. I mean, I agree with Gul that it is obviously they have reasserted themselves compared to recent months and so on. But I mean, looking at it in the long-term perspective, this doesn't seem a massive change to anything that we've seen over the last 20 years. And they, you know, they essentially continue to dominate the media. They control the Pakistan's perspective on foreign policy. The position of the mainstream parties on Kashmir remains the same. You get the same rhetoric from, for example, Bilawal Bhutto again speaking about Kashmir today that you get from the army. There is no separation there. And I've always argued that as long as Pakistan remains ideologically determined to define itself as not only not India, but in some kind of constant battle to regain Kashmir, the army controls mainstream thinking in Pakistan. And then, of course, I would just briefly add to that, they also still have tremendous leverage over the economy with all their interests in real estate and in industry. So I don't see any evidence of them being weaker than they have been since, over 20 years, and therefore no need to launch a coup when your essential presence in the country remains unchallenged.
Gul, I'd like to come back to a point you made about Imran Khan, if you like, crossing a line with some of these comments, extraordinarily acidic comments he made about the chief of army staff. The question I have is this: if the army is really so irate with him, and it is a powerful institution, why is he still roaming around free? Mia Nawaz Sharif, after all, ended up in exile. Other leaders have ended up dead. And you, of course, were arrested and hounded out of your homeland under terrifying circumstances. Imran Khan doesn't seem to be that badly off. Why is this?
Okay, I'll answer this first, but I'd really like to touch upon the coup question later on as well, if you don't mind. It's a very, very grave observation that I made long ago, quite a long time ago, after Imran Khan came into power, and we could see that he's going to end in flames. He was taking the economy down. He had incompetent people in. And it's a very serious thing, and it's not a nice thing to say, and it's not something that I support, but it was an observation I made back then. And it was that when Imran Khan is out of power, he will not be left loose or free, because he's unpredictable, he's a loony, and he's unstable, and he's not statesperson-like. And therefore, these are very serious things to say. Therefore, he would either be dead or in prison. And guess what? I turned out to be wrong. They did leave him loose, and they made a mistake again, which they have now started to undo. They left it too late. They left it too late. He was never a person who could be trusted to act like a politician, to act like a statesperson. He was always going to go berserk. And just like they assessed him wrong when they brought him into power, they assessed him wrong when they kicked him out.
So
this was their fatal mistake.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but then two question arises. If the army doesn't wield the big stick of a coup, as it did with Benazir Bhutto, with Sharif, what influence does it have? Can it really terrorize major political actors into doing what it wants them to do if it doesn't have that stick in its hand?
It cannot. It does not. And the possibility of a coup, first of all, I would agree with Myra that when it's in power and it's all in all in certain respects, it doesn't need to carry out a coup. It had its own government for those 4 years, its very own government. Imran Khan was not making any major decisions. He was not interfering with anything. He was just busy with the Gogi gang and the Usman Buzdar gang and Malik Riaz and making money left, right, and center and grabbing. And they had the affairs of state in their hands. But also remember that, Article 6 was tightened up in 2006. This is the article that talks about treason. And, the politicians grabbed every word from the thesaurus and bunged it in there. Because previously what dictators used to do was they would hold the constitution in abeyance. They would not violate it, right? So they've put in every word. And then after that, Musharraf's trial happened. So nobody would dare carry out a martial law. And I think that when you say what is the big stick that they hold now if they cannot carry out, and also remember, there are no wars raging in our neighborhood in which our army can be rented out and can have dollars raining down on it. Those are the times when it is easy for the army to carry out a coup, to be accepted by world powers, and to be supported by it and be funded by it. Right now, the country was at the brink of default, as you know very well yourself. And they needed a stable government that could talk to foreign powers, that could bring some money in. You can see what's happening. Shahbaz Sharif going off to China. Finally, the PDM went to the IMF, the World Bank, the ADB. They need these people now, and there is no big stick left. There was one thing they used to have, which was control over narrative. Right. And they don't have that anymore. You can see it.
That's really interesting. And I want to come on this sort of international dimension, if you like, Myra. There was a time when you couldn't go to Washington or to London without people asking about India and Pakistan. And one gets the sense that's not really the case anymore. You had the World Bank and the ADP and others sort of bailing out Pakistan on the one hand, but you also had President Joe Biden making some pretty nasty remarks about it. And the recent United States strategic posture review doesn't mention the word Pakistan. You were here in the days when the most dangerous place on earth used to be India, Pakistan, and these fears of a conflict. Is that phase over? Does the world care anymore about Kashmir or Pakistan now that Afghanistan is over and done with?
I mean, I agree with your summary. Is that but I mean, we haven't had a real India-Pakistan confrontation since 2001, 2002. So obviously, you have to be old like me, or you, to remember these things.
Why, thank you, Myra.
Obviously, India's economy is still growing. It's a huge economy, and so people are going to focus on building ties with India come what may, because that's seen as one of the major growth markets. Everyone knows that India is very, very prickly about being hyphenated with Pakistan. And I would say probably a fair amount of bitterness about Pakistan's role in Afghanistan. I mean, America did lose that war and its allies. I don't know, but I don't think it would have lost that war if Pakistan had been properly cooperative. The reason I have slight hesitation in being 100% clear on that is that I'm not convinced that anyone has properly thought through what it means to let Pakistan drift more and more into the China camp. And I personally think you can argue it both ways. I mean, in some ways, I think it wouldn't be nice for the people of Pakistan, but I think it would do Pakistan, it would be a real kind of wake-up call for it to be properly dependent on China and discover that China is not actually any nicer and probably less sympathetic than the West when it comes to Pakistan's interests. I think in some ways it's tempting, let Pakistan go the whole way and kind of wake up. On the other hand, you have to think through so many steps here. What happens with the growing confrontation between the US and China if Pakistan becomes completely a Chinese satellite state? I personally don't have an answer to that, and I get the impression from some of the muddled language coming out of DC that it hasn't fully been thought through yet.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with that. And I can, if I may just draw you out a little bit, because you've discussed this in your books. One of the sort of things that's repeatedly driven India and Pakistan into crisis, which then sucks in the West, is of course Kashmir. Long before the insurgency broke out, there's been these successive cycles of crisis. With the West itself now more focused on Ukraine, on geopolitical competition with China, and of course recovering from the battering the entire world took during COVID. Do you see any appetite in Western capitals to try and find a way forward on Kashmir, to broker something on Kashmir? Because as you know, General Bajwa has been knocking on doors in London and in the US saying, help me out here. Do you see any real appetite for that in the way there would have been 10 or 20 years ago?
Probably not. I thought that the deal, whether it would have worked or not, I don't know, but the deal on the table that worked out by Musharraf and Manmohan Singh was probably the best Pakistan was ever going to get. And when you saw Pakistan effectively walk away from that and follow it up with the Mumbai attacks, then my impression has always been, until Pakistan is willing to reconsider its position and accept that it's not going to get the valley back, then and accept some kind of compromise, agreement that allows the LOC to become effectively the international border. Until Pakistan's ready to do that, then there is no obvious solution. I think there will always be interest in firefighting, in the sense that nobody wants a war between India and Pakistan that risks escalating into a nuclear exchange. So from my understanding, there'll always be people who are kind of working behind the scenes, trying to keep the conversation going, make sure there is some kind of cushion there in the event of a big flare-up. But carving out a peace deal on Kashmir, it doesn't seem to me that, I also felt that the disaggregation of the Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir pretty much marked the end of that. The time when you could talk about the entirety of the state and find a solution for it has gone. We no longer have a state of Jammu and Kashmir, which I personally thought was tragic. I thought it killed off any hopes of peace, but I also think that's where we are now.
So I should let our viewers in on a secret at this point, which is right after Imran Khan's wife, who apparently has the service of 2 James, Gul Bukhari is also a fantastic fortune teller. I'm just joking. But I'm going to ask you, Gul, to do a little crystal ball gazing here in the spirit of all things Imran Khan. Pakistan in really difficult times. People really have suffered because of the recent floods. With the World Bank structural adjustment demands, prices spiraling up, probably a great deal of hardship lying ahead with subsidy cuts and taxation hikes. Isn't all of this going to strengthen Imran Khan, at least in the short term? Isn't the battering the economy taking going to make people resentful of the Sharifs and others like them?
Yes. I think there are several sort of thoughts going through people at this present time when I talk to them. Of course, people are resentful. Of course, they're hurting. But if you try and think about it, is a Sharif voter or a Zardari or Bhutto voter or a Maulana voter, because of this hurt that is being caused, are they actually going to go and vote for Imran Khan? I would say not. I've been doing these checkings. The other thing is that you have to analyze Imran himself as well to be able to kind of understand this. Imran was not organically popular. He was a manufactured item. He was made to sit on Hamid Mir's program, Capital Talk, Geo Television, 4 or 5 times, in a week, and all alone. And it's been years since he sat in a show with somebody else there. And his popularity was manufactured. And that crutch, that narrative building machine has taken away its crutches now. And that very machine, which brought him to that point of 2011 and that Jalsa, and then him getting a good enough sort of majority, not a clear majority, but the largest party in KP in 2013. And then the big heist that was carried out in 2018. All of that is gone. And look at the press conference today. Look at, it was not enough to have Faisal Wavda do the presser that he did last night. He did not take the names, but it was almost the same as the DG ISPR and the DG ISI's press conference sans the names, right?
I'll just interrupt you though. People listening to what you've just said will say, but wait a minute, Imran just won 6 out of 7 seats. He seems to have an enormous personal popularity, which Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who may be a very competent man, isn't exactly the most charismatic leader in the country. Wouldn't that also be true?
Well, on the face of it, yes, but I would argue that if you noticed, the People's Party did fight that election and did win the 2 seats. And in the Multan seat, Nawaz Sharif put his weight behind Yusuf Raza's son, who was contesting against PTI Shah Mahmood's daughter, and they won that, and by a good majority. In Punjab, did you notice they did not even actually contest the election, really? There was no campaigning, no jalsa, no speeches. There was no, it felt as if there was no election happening. I don't know why, and the voters are very angry. His MPs and MNAs are very angry, but there was a decision to let Imran Khan be and let his patrons deal with him himself. And the result was always, Praveen, remember, he was contesting on all seats himself. And the end result is he did not increase a single seat for himself, despite winning those in the National Assembly. Indeed, he lost 2. And then he was disqualified and he lost his original seat. He was de-seated. So this was some weird game being played by PMLN. If PMLN is going to, and if Nawaz Sharif, when he goes back and he's in Punjab, in Pakistan, and he campaigns, that will be the test. Now, Imran Khan alone was contesting these seats against almost nobodies, where there was, in Karachi, the Liari seat, he lost to a literal nobody, but in Multan, he lost it to Yusuf Raza Gilani's son. Where did you see Mariam contesting against him, or Bilawal, or Nawaz, or Maulana? This election was not really contested. Right. So I will not take it as an indication of his soaring popularity. And actually, there's a very interesting thing. If you compare the numbers, the votes, these seats were held by PTI people with bigger margins and more votes in the 2018 election. And this time, Imran Khan was contesting and he got won with lower amounts of votes. And the other side was not pushing back.
So a final question, and I'll give this to you, Myra, because you sort of touched on this when you talked about Kashmir. assuming that we are now faced with a new reality, both on the Indian side of the line of control and on the Pakistani side, a sort of permanent, if you like, alteration of the ground reality. Do you foresee that Pakistan will eventually come to live in some kind of peace, if not happiness, but at least peace with this reality? Or do you foresee that with a reversal in its economic or strategic fortunes, the Pakistan army will feel obliged to push its case on Kashmir? I asked because since 2019, we've had very low levels of violence in Kashmir, no real major acts of terrorism, despite the transformation in the status quo. And as someone who's watched these things carefully, I was wondering whether you see this as a change in the Pakistan army that is strategic or just tactical. Again, I'm asking you to do a little soothsaying.
Yeah, well, if it's possible to be halfway between, I would say somewhere between tactical and strategic. I mean, obviously, because I've written about Siachen, I pay a lot of attention to the Gilgit-Baltistan and Ladakh region, which, as you know, is far more strategically important than the Kashmir Valley, and particularly important for the Pakistan-China, CPEC, the Karakoram Highway. I am assuming that China does not want conflict flaring up around that part of the former princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, and that if there is enough money to be made by securing stability in Gilgit and Baltistan, and maybe we see from time to time the notion that it could be incorporated as a full province of Pakistan, and then India used to complain about it. I don't think it's quite so noisy about that anymore. It seems to me that from a pure strategic point of view, Pakistan has a greater interest in retaining and stabilizing Gilgit-Baltistan. However, and this is not a problem of the Kashmir, of the Pakistan military alone, it goes all through politics, including, as I said earlier, the PPP. The ideological underpinnings of Pakistan that require it to see it as a savior for Kashmiri Muslims living in the valley are still there. So it's not that it's a strategic thing to get the valley back, but it remains so fundamental to Pakistan's ideology and notion of its existence that I guess I would say that there's two contradictory factors at work. Strategically, they should let it go, but then what is Pakistan when it's no longer the champion of Muslims in the subcontinent? How does it the answer it hasn't been able to find since 47. How does it reinvent itself as a normal country rather than an ideological country? And those questions, I'm afraid, rather depressingly remain unchanged.
So on that slightly unhappy note, thank you both for joining us. I'd love to have you back and would be delighted if we have another British Prime Minister in the next few weeks, so that we'll have the opportunity again to draw you both in.
Number 10 is an Airbnb right now.
Failing that, I hope that there will be more political drama. We haven't had enough opportunities to have these conversations, and I'd really look forward to having the two of you back. Thank you all for listening to Crosshairs, and I will see you again next week. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.